All right. We're gonna give a couple people a minute to come in, but I'll go ahead and start with my introduction. And as people are coming into the webinar, we'll go ahead and get you all started. My name is Jason Meany. I am the Education Coordinator and Marketing Director for International Training. What International Training is a training agency that's made up by a couple different training agencies: Scuba Diving International, Performance Freediving International, Technical Diving International, Emergency Response Diving International, and First Response Training International. So that's a conglomerate of things. We are joined by the stunt divers from Avatar 2, some of them, and we are going to kind of do a bunch of question and answer things and just get to know some of these wonderful people that helped out with Avatar 2. So I'm gonna go around and have you all introduce yourselves. I'll call you out one by one so that there's not confusion. Emily, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of give us a background of how you got into this sort of thing?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Sieber. I've been synchronized swimming since a very young age of 7. I got into Avatar when I first did a stunt with David Blaine, and he introduced me to the wonderful world of free diving. And one of my friends heard about them needing some underwater stunt performers. I was contacted by our wonderful stunt coordinator, Garrett Warren, for some testing, and the rest is kind of history. I did the underwater stunts for Sigourney Weaver, Bailey Bass, and Kate Winslet.
Nice. Thank you very much. All right, Chris, let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself next.
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Chris Dennison. I am a stuntman, PFI freediving instructor, and scuba dive instructor as well. I came on the Avatar project in 2017. Previously, as a stunt performer, I'd done a stunt for Garrett Warren on another movie, and he knew I had a bit of a water background. So came in, ended up working on the project, Avatar 2 and 3, during production for 17, 18, 2019, and a little bit into 2020.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. We'll continue on that route. Mike, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself next?
So my name is Mike Avery, and I am a PFI freediving instructor, and that's how I got onto the project. Our founder, Kirk Krack, had reached out to some of the instructors, letting it be known that they were going to probably be looking for some background, some people to do some stunt world. And I got in very early when there was a call out from our stunt coordinator to come do some testing in LA on some of the creatures when they were trying to figure out how to make the creatures work. I think that was the only day where it was scheduled to shoot for 2 days, and it went faster and only shot for 1 day. I think that was the only time we were ahead of schedule on that thing. But we basically found out it didn't really work, and we had to go back to it. So I was a swimmer, water polo player, kind of since I was the age of 7. So really about the water. Learned how to scuba dive when I was 14. So yeah, that's how I just kind of fell into my lap being an instructor. I got lucky.
Hello. Very nice. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. All right, Liz, go ahead. You next.
Hey everyone, my name is Liz Parkinson, and I was a swimmer growing up, and that's my background. That's how I got into my water world, I guess. I came over to the US. I grew up in South Africa at 18, and I trained in the US for my college years. So similar to Emily, we were NCAA athletes. I became a scuba instructor and a freediving instructor, and I met the team in the Bahamas down in Nassau, where Jim had brought the Avatar team down to kind of test out some of the things they needed in the water, get the already then stunt people involved. And it was through John Garvin and Matt O'Connor that who are safety coordinator and marine coordinator on the production. And yeah, I went out and did some testing, and I guess Jim liked the way that I swam, and that was sort of my in on the into the world of Pandora.
Nice. I appreciate that. Thank you, Liz. All right. So I think one of the things we need to start out with that, because we have a mix of people that are going to be watching this, and what exactly is a stunt diver, and what are they doing within, especially, I mean, there were stunt divers, and then I think this really kind of pushed it above and beyond and kind of made a bunch of extra different things out of with what, James Cameron was looking for in Avatar 2 and the vision. what is a stunt diver? And then let's kind of like go into like, how did Avatar 2 change kind of your definition of a stunt diver? Chris, you and I spoke yesterday kind of about this, so I know you've got an answer for me, so I'll pick on you first. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jason, there's an important distinction between motion capture and performance capture. And Avatar, all the sequels are really performance capture, being that James Cameron is having performers act out everything that's going on that they capture. So it's not just an animated movie that is informed by motion capture, right? Like the whole thing is shot practically on a stage, and then the visual effects are added later. So as the stunt team, we're kind of the workhorses that come in and provide a lot of that performance. And the job is very broad. You know, every day is different. I think in practical terms for the dive team, like there could be times where we're coming in, we're training actors, we're working with the cast. There could be times where we come in and we're testing various stunt rigs. You know, during principal photography, we come in and we're actually shooting the film. And, you know, the beauty of a movie like Avatar is you can have performers play multiple characters, right? Because a lot of the skins, the character map is going to be added later in post-production. So, you know, we're kind of these Swiss Army knives on the movie set that come in and do a little bit of everything. And the expectation, especially when you're working for James Cameron, is really, really high. You know, you have to be durable. You have to be a good diver. You have to be super heads up, good listener. Also have the acting chops too. So, you know, more so than any other movie set, I think the standards were just really elevated for what the stunt team had to do to help produce the movie.
Beautiful. And with that, let's go ahead and we'll talk about I'm gonna have to get you some of your other answers, but why don't you guys talk about, and I think Emily, you mentioned it before, what your role was as a stunt diver, what you doubled stunting wise, and kind of what what role did you play? Because I think people look at it traditionally like, oh, this person looks like this person, that's their stunt double, this is what they do. And that's definitely not the case here. So I think description of what you all did, because probably the audience is looking and going, all right, who was who in the movie, as opposed to what you guys really truly did. Emily, since you mentioned it, we'll go ahead, and Chris, if you've got an extra answer, we'll come to you last. So Emily, why don't you go ahead, maybe answer that last question and make sure you put in kind of what your role was as a stunt diver.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think you can say it any better than Chris did with what a stunt diver really is. You know, we had to be super versatile, coming in something new every day, and just kept us on our toes. And Jim is just so amazing, creating that playground for us essentially to get done what we needed to get done underwater and really put ourselves into the scene that we were doing. As far as who we played, we kind of, you know, that, like you said, it's not one size fits all either, you know. Certainly I did a lot of Sigourney Weaver's character Kiri, and Kate Winslet with Renolin, and Bailey Bass with Soraya. But sometimes it would depend on who would fit into what scene, depending on scale and things like that. It could interchange very easily. And like Chris said as well, we could play all kinds of different characters, creatures, even, you know, anything that was in the scene was a person doing that. So it was always interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that a lot of people, and that's one of the things that was shocking to me, is every single thing is someone's playing those things. So even if you consider doubles, I mean, what's the smallest thing that somebody played? Liz, why don't you answer that? Like, what's the smallest animal or thing that someone played?
Yeah, so again, just bouncing off Chris and Em, Garrett, who was our stunt coordinator, had us be super flexible when it came to what we could and couldn't be. And I think at one point, Mike and I were biomass, which sounds really strange, but we would be on our scooter zooming around, and we would be in the computer that day as a specific fish. I think I was actually a fish shot one day, which is pretty wild to think about it now. And when I watched the production, I was like, oh yeah, that's me there. So I could like tell my folks like, yeah, I was the fish that got shot. So one thing I really remember Garrett saying to me at a very early stage, he's like, people are going to go into this film and they're going to be like, oh, you know, it's all CGI'd and, you know, it's really cool visually, but every single live thing that is underwater and on land is all a human movement. So we were everything from, like I said, the biomass to the talcoon, to the akula, to the creatures. And Mike can very well speak towards that the Matakayen, as well as the Navi, Jake and Sully and their family rode as well. So we were everything all the time. And like Emily said, it was just a case of being super flexible on the day. And you could be a human or a Matakayen in one scene, and then you jump out the water and you're a creature in the next scene. So yeah, I think biomass was my smallest, but I was shot many times by,
Nice.
you know.
That's excellent. I love that. That's a great answer. I mean, I find it hard to believe, based off of looking at Mike and his surroundings, that he was biomass at any point in time. I mean, he's just so stoic there. But all right, fine. I'll go with it. Mike, why don't you go and talk on that point?
Yeah, I mean, we were a lot of different things. I did the creatures mostly. That was a big thing that I kind of did. And there was more of us that did it, but I would say my main role was piloting the creatures. That's how I got in early when we did that early testing. I think the funny part is when people ask, where are you? Like Jim had said, he could pick out everybody's swim stroke. It's all distinctive. If you've ever seen swimmers, like everybody has a interesting stroke. And I can tell, most of us could probably tell when it's Chris Dennison kicking, especially breaststroke, because he has a very distinctive wacko knee movement. So you definitely, I've picked out a couple scenes in that movie where I'm like, well, there's Chris. And it's really hard because we shot at different times and you have the actors doing it. And sometimes you just don't even know, because when we jump in, you'd say, hey, we kind of worked out some of the beats. This is how I think you should maybe try this going through the set, like put your hand here, go there. They would make it their own. So it's always hard to see if they took your advice so sometimes those little things get in your head. You're like, I think I remember doing that. Maybe that was me, but it's really, really hard. Most people I tell them I'm a lot of the ELUs. I mean, I played an ELU so much that my dog is named ELU.
I love it. Very good. Thanks. Here is, Chris, you said it, but I really think we should harp on it and really make sure that we've got a really clear, positive definition of this motion capture versus performance capture. And you said it well, but I want to have a clear, distinct definition, because even preparing for this, I didn't have a good definition until I was starting to talk with John Garvin a little bit and going, okay, all right, that makes sense. And then looking at it, realizing how different that actually truly is. Like, it's a one-word difference, but it is a big difference between them. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this in the other webinars, but since you brought it up, I guess, Chris, I'll go to you on this since you brought it up. So can you really give us a true, nice, deep understanding of the difference between performance capture and motion capture?
Yeah, Jason, the best way to put it is motion capture is just kind of like the seed from which you would world build, whereas performance capture is the world. And I'll give you an example in like the movie making world. So if I get hired as a stunt coordinator, let's say to stunt coordinate like a video game, right? The motion capture element might be you have a bunch of performers inside of a volume, and it's a dry volume, and you have them do some generic motion, running, jumping, shooting, fighting, whatever. Then the animators take that stuff and kind of build on it, right? They build in all the reactions. Then it goes to the sound department. They design in, all the sound effects and the grunts of a fight or something like that. Whereas performance capture, you're capturing everything, right? So whereas like the generic motion capture might just be the broad strokes. Like when you get that motion into a computer, maybe it just looks like a stick figure that's walking. Performance capture, we have capture balls that optically the cameras see inside of a volume. We have them on our fingers, we have them on our heads. You'll have a helmet that has a camera that gets every single facial expression. You've seen the pictures of like dots all over the face, which can capture an eyebrow raise or something. And then within that space, you're performing as organically as possible, meaning all the sound effects, all the breath of the character, something they're doing. If it's a scene where they're interacting with a baby, James Cameron would have a real baby there. So you're getting the coos of the baby, and like, it's a much more authentic style of movie making for sure. But it's a giant commitment. And if you look at just the tremendous amount of work that goes into that, you can't help but tip your hat to James Cameron, because it would have been easier to go the other route and just kind of animate the whole movie. And he's like, negative, we're doing everything legitimate. And that kind of plays into, Jason, like the decision to do wet for everything versus dry for wet. You know, dry for wet meaning somebody's on a stage and they're doing this, then you animate the water around them, versus wet for wet, you're actually in a fully functional underwater motion capture volume. And it's all the little things, right? Like I've shot dry for wet on other movies, and you know, you'll see a character sculling and they don't have their fingers together, but then they're actually underwater, they have to do this to actually move. And it's like, it's such a small detail, but your brain can pick it out. I think Jim knew that, and that's why he committed to such a daring approach of doing wet for wet. But really, with the performance capture, it enriches the end result by like a factor of 1,000. Turns out pretty cool.
Yeah. And anybody can answer this one. How long does it take to be able to see the fruits of your labor? Like how long before that shot is done? Because with traditional motion capture, you know, it goes back in, they render it, and you see, a lot of people have seen like the Pixar in the background of like all the hair is going all over the place because they didn't render it correctly. How long does it for you to actually go ahead and see the final image there? Anybody? Emily, Liz, Mike?
You can almost, obviously the final image, we're not going to see that maybe until the movie comes out, but
right.
An incredible, it almost looks final when you're looking at it on the monitor, because you are looking at yourself as a Navi in the monitor, in the environment, and you can really tell what you're doing. It's spectacular. It's something I still don't understand. And it's, like you're almost seeing it live, when you're performing, like, where you are and what you're doing, what you're touching, what you're performing in, like you can really put that in your brain for your performance. But as far as the final image goes, there's so much that goes into it. Everyone is so spectacular to get to do what we had done. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead, Mike. Yeah, go, Mike. You go.
I would say, I guess what you're asking, it seems like we could actually see ourselves as Navi almost instantaneously. Weta cleaned it up a lot to what you finally saw, but you would actually see yourself moving through the set. You saw the kelp pieces, you saw all the creatures and things like that. That Weta really cleaned it up to make it look a lot crisper, what you finally saw. I was really blown away when they brought in the 3D camera, when you could actually see in the 3D images that they were shooting with that. And that was pretty amazing, even at the tank. So that's all I'd have to say about that one.
Talk more about the 3D camera. You just drop it out there like that, and then you roll on it. Sorry, Liz, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't want to leave that like, oh yeah, this 3D camera is amazing. And next, like, come on, man.
All I remember, there were so many technical things that they had to work out with it on set. It was a huge camera just to bring it in and out, and to keep everybody warm. We're in the water so long shooting days, we're still wearing wetsuits, and the wetsuits also had the performance capture balls on it. But we actually had to turn the tank temperature down because they were literally floating the 3D camera in like a ice bath to keep it cool because of the electronics. And that would be the camera department to understand all that stuff. But I do remember that this monster camera that the camera department and Pete Zuccarini were using, that just constantly blowing cold air on it, throw it in an ice bath. I don't know where they were going down to get gobs and gobs of ice, but that was a big problem with keeping the tank at, I think, around 91 is usually where we had it, like 90, and they had to drop it down a couple degrees. Maybe somebody else remembers more about this monster camera.
And we're going to be doing a camera webinar later on all that sort of stuff. So that's perfect. And we're going to get into that. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure we didn't glance over that. My apologies, Liz, for cutting you off. So go right ahead.
No, I was just going to feed off what sort of Emily and Mike had started. I remember this one day, Jim walked onto the set and he said to us, standing on the bridge over the tank, he's like, right, guys, today we are going to film the most beautiful scene of Avatar. This is why people are going to come back several times to see the production once it comes out. And I remember us kind of like looking underwater and thinking, Okay, boss, because we work in what you guys saw and what we worked in couldn't be more opposite. And I know that in Kirk's webinar, when he spoke to you, he talked about zinting and how the world of Avatar was already created, or the world of Pandora was already created. So we were living and breathing, like Emily said, in this world all the time. And it was a case of us figuring out what places to touch and what places not to touch, so that we would, move through the coral systems or come out of the water, and Jim would lift the level of the water and move things around as he felt like he needed to present the Pandora world the way he wanted it. And several times, I think all of us went through situations where we actually got out of our suits, and we would go in on the weekends and they would record just the way the water moved over our arms and the muscle structure within our faces under a very shallow current to a very, very hard current. So that when you see the film and you see the driblets of water dripping down the Maracaian faces of the characters, we all did that. And I remember Jim saying how important it was for it to be so authentic, so that it really felt like, and when I watched it, it felt like, Zoe's character and Kate's character, Sigourney's character, and the kids, they was like watching real humans in the water, as opposed to 9-foot blue people on a distant planet. So yeah, it was very, very specific on making it as human-like, so that it didn't really leave much for our imaginations to pick up. We knew exactly what we were seeing all the time.
I love it. Good answer. Thank you. We have a question from somebody in the webinar. This should put it up on the screen, I believe. But what it's saying is, are you dealing with the underwater set pieces and rigs to create the creatures and give it a sense of scale, or are the creatures created by piecing together the individual people? I think that makes sense. And I think that's a good question to clarify.
Who's got that
Liz,
one?
it looks like you're ready to talk.
Well, I think Emily touched on it a little bit when she said, depending on, because I also doubled several of the characters that she did, but I did it in a completely different way, where I was working with different characters because I'm taller than she is. So the eye level and the direction of which the actors would talk to or react to was different in different scenes, including that of the creatures and the set pieces. Like I mentioned before, we did have a big tank, but there was only so much space within the tank. So Jim would have it that we would aim for different parts of the structures. So if the creature had to be close up and very large, we'd aim for a lower part, so it gave the screen more space to capture that. Or if it was a surface shot and we had to be far in the background. So we were told a lot. We were given a lot of information to deal with, so that we knew sort of where we were in the world. And there's one particular scene, I think, that Chris was doubling Britton Dalton's character, who was Loak, one of the children of Jake and Natiri, and I was one of the creatures going after him. In the production of it, when it comes out, I'm this massive animal, and I'm taller than Chris. So it was a weird situation, because I'd be chasing after him in this structure that was massive, but it was quite small underwater. So it was all the perspective of what visual effects came up afterwards that created the world that we were working in the perceived space that we were allowed to work in as well.
Nice. Good. Thank you. I think that answers that very well. All right. So people are starting to get chatty here, which is wonderful. And I love that. What I'm going to do is ask you one question from my list of questions. Then I'm going to grab a couple of questions from these individuals. Thermal concerns. One of the things I really wanted to get to is the amount of time that all of you were in the water on a set time, and anyone that's a scuba instructor or freediving instructor or dive professional in any way, shape, or form can probably not relate fully, but has spent a significant amount of time in the water. This is a very different situation at the same time. And Mike, you mentioned that the pool temp was 91, but you guys are still getting cold, right? Essentially, even with that 91 sometimes.
So we had to worry about that, especially when we weren't allowed to wear wetsuits. So when we were shooting the spider character, with the I think there were 2 mil wetsuits or 1.5, somewhere in there, that we were wearing. Never really got cold if you're in a wetsuit, but yeah, if it's 90 degrees and you're just wearing basically the get up that Spider is wearing, you got cold. And Chris could attest to that because he doubled Spider on that one. So you could definitely, Chris would be like, there's a couple times when he would get cold. I mean, we had a hot tub also on set, which after the water, that seemed to be the hangout spot after a while where we'd all be getting in this nice little hot tub. But it's weird that you think 91 is really warm, but after a while, yeah, it can get cold, especially if you're not wearing a wetsuit. So maybe Chris can answer a little bit more about that without the get up.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I shudder when people talk about the 3D camera because those are like the coldest days on set. So, basically I was wearing a loincloth, effectively doubling this guy, and I had to lose a good bit of weight. My body fat was pretty low, and I remember just the camera was overheating, the housing was fogging, so they had to turn the water temp down. And I'm watching like all the grips, all the camera guys put on hoods and gloves and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a long day. And what I would do is at the bottom of the tank, like the 30-foot mark in the sump, we had the outlet, or the inlet rather, where the warm water would come in after it got turned over through the filters. And it was like maybe a degree warmer than the surrounding water. And I would swim down between takes on a breath hold, and I would just hug that thing, and I would just sit there for like 2 minutes, just getting like slightly warmer water. And to John Garvin's credit, he's our dive supervisor. Like, he tried really, really hard to help, and he would pipe in like ultra hot water, like 104-degree water in a hose. And I found that changed my base too much, just going from hot water to cooler water. And yeah, as Mike said, I mean, we're in ocean or 1.5 mil comp suits, and on a long enough timeline, 16 hours, you're still cold. So, really there's a trick to it though. The trick is to suck it up. So I would just pound water and pound Gatorade and just hope that I could piss myself constantly to like stay a little bit warmer. And that was weeks and weeks of that, right? So, you just deal with it. Like, there's no way around it for sure. And to the cast credit, I mean, when the actor would come in, he's in the same thing as me. He's dealing with the same conditions, and he sucked it up just fine. So it's not everything in movie making is comfortable, and the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can just kind of move on from it.
I love it. Very good answer. Thank you guys. Emily, I'm going to have you answer one of the ones that's coming from the people in the webinar. What is the most amount of people that were in the water at once that you saw?
Oh boy. That's really hard to answer. I don't know why this popped into my head, but I'm like 30. It could be, it's just really dependent on what we're doing. It could be 2, 5, it could be a whole bunch. I mean, you have camera in there, you have people working lighting, you have safety, you have stunt performers, you have actors. It just really depends on what we're doing that day. It could be a lot. It could be few.
Yeah. And I think where that's coming from is a little bit of like, wait, you didn't just do the motion capture, you did the full capture of the performance. So wait, now I'm starting to realize that it wasn't, you're acting underwater. I think that's what's starting to kind of hit people here. And then another, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so part of the performance capture with the technology there was that we could actually really only, I can't remember if it was about six people that you could get really performance capture of. Otherwise, the computers would get overwhelmed and they couldn't capture, and they'd start to go, or then you'd have the Friday night crash where it would crash the computer for 2 hours. But yeah, as Emily said, we had a bunch of grips, camera guys. So performance wise, we'd have 6. Maybe we pushed it to 8 because that would be a gym thing to say, hey, no, we can get 1 more, we can get 2 more in the volume and get the computer to work. And you better make the computer work because this is my movie and it's going to be amazing. So yeah, Emily is probably right. Like, we had 20, 30 people in there when you have safety. But then there would be times when the computer would just be a computer and be kind of glitching, and it would be like, get everybody out of this volume, go hide in the corners. Because that's also part of how you're going to get into this later, but that's why we did everything on a breath hold. Not only were we coming up and down really quick, so you couldn't really do it on Scuba, the Scuba bubbles would actually confuse the performance capture system and just throw it haywire. So it really came down to we had to sometimes minimize the people in the volume, but also then your support staff was there, which was amazing. We had a great just camera grip team. I mean, Emily was saved by one of our camera guys one time when her hair got stuck in a little thing. So, we had the right amount of people in there to keep everybody safe and get the shots.
Nice. All right. So that just opened up like 3 different pathways that I have to choose which way to go. And there's 3 different questions from the people in the webinar that hit everything that Mike just said. So, all right. One question is what stunt, and I think based off what you guys can give me, I can make this work. What was one stunt that was especially dangerous? I have to address the fact that the bubbles and also the top of the water also kind of go ahead and create a mirroring effect. So we have to talk about the white balls that go on top of that. And then a question about physiologic stuff. So that brings into how dangerous those white balls are, who choked on a white ball, and who had to get a Heimlich maneuver done. There it is. Thank you, Chris. All right. So Chris, since you had to actually get it, who gave you the Heimlich maneuver, by the way?
Kirk Krack did. I think it might have been the world's
Really?
first underwater Heimlich maneuver. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Okay. So let's get into that a little bit now that we've kind of briefed that. Let's talk about the white balls that are on the top, and then I guess they're balls. Are they? Yeah. Let's talk about those and kind of run down that story really quick, because I had that as one of the stories I kind of wanted to talk about. So
yeah, so effectively, you're working in 2 different mocap volumes. There's the underwater one and the surface volume, right? And what that means is that it's a separate set of underwater cameras that are capturing the performance underwater, and then a separate set up top, and you have to link those 2. You have to make them work together. So there's cameras up top that are shooting down, cameras down below that are shooting up. And the surface of the water really creates a problem because there's a lot of reflection, right? So what Jim's solution was, which was brilliant, is cover the surface of the water in a bunch of tiny little white balls that I don't know how many there were, but it seemed like there's millions of them. You could still ascend through it. You could still descend. You couldn't see through it. It kind of looked like ice cubes up at the top. And that would just create like an opaque layer that the cameras weren't seeing themselves through. So there was all this talk about somebody's going to choke on one of those. I swallowed one once. Emily swallowed one once, right?
Yes.
I swallowed one once.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Mike,
like,
are you just left out, Mike, or did you?
I'm
have to
the
get you
talented
one?
A couple times I was like a seal with a ball in my mouth, but I never inhaled one. Nope. Managed that one.
Fair enough.
And
Sorry to
Mike
derail
was-
you there, Chris. I just needed to make sure that we didn't need to find him one to swallow at some point in time.
yeah, my buoyancy's never been the same since I swallowed that ball, so I reckon it's still in there. But there was once where I came up to the surface on a creature rig, turned to catch a little bit of a swim breath. The rig went down, so I blame Mike for this. And then I was just trying to catch a little bit of a breath. So it was on a full exhale, and like just that first initial part of my peak inhalation, this ball shot down, and it felt like it was in the middle of my windpipe, and so I like tried to dislodge it, like get it out, and it felt like it went lower, like it probably wasn't here, but it felt like it was here, and I was like, oh, this isn't good. So pushed off the creature, swam back over to Kirk. He was right behind me. We were in a current at that point, and grabbed him by his neck weight and pulled him about this close to my nose and gave him the international symbol for no breathing. And I don't know if you ever got the Heimlich maneuver, but like you have to do it freaking hard, like super hard. So it took him a while to get the thing out. Got it dislodged. I came to the surface. We were like halfway around the tank at that point. And I was like, that was awesome. Like, are you kidding me that just happened? And everybody was pretty spooked. They were like, we're going to take lunch early. And I'm like, no, I'm good. And as I was going around and Kirk is just like giving me the business, I'm thinking, man, like this is a stupid way to die, but it's a great story. Like I can remember like my family after I'm gone being like, well, here's how Chris died. It's a bit of a story. So fortunately that only ever happened once. And it happened to the right person, just like the most knuckle draggy guy. It didn't happen in the cast or anything, but that's just one of those hazards. And in terms of things being dangerous, the environments we're in, it's overhead environments, they're building little cave-like structures and things, a lot of the materials they used is sharp edges and things like that. And there's plenty of hazards, but we lean into a great team. The stunt rigging team sets up a lot of the rigs we do, if it's a ratchet or a line pull or a winch move or something. And hats off to those guys, because man, like everybody was looking at safety every day. And the amount of precautions that we took, we would get in and check something out, then the cast would come in. Like, it's a very controlled environment. And with that, some of the things that we did in that environment would be considered like very dangerous in the open ocean. But the fact that we were in a tank, sometimes had 2-to-1 safeties, and some of the things we were doing, that's stunts 101. You eliminate as much risk as possible.
Very nice. Emily or Liz, is your swallowing story exciting?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know about you guys, but what is it, like maybe 3.5, 4 years later, I'm still finding those white balls. Like, I'll open my bag and one will bounce down the floor in my apartment, and I'll be like, I miss those guys. I was on airplanes where, like, I know Emily can attest to this, like we would get our hair done up because we wear our helmets every day, and I would be getting on a flight, like the red eye on a Friday after we wrapped, and a bull would like bounce out from underneath my braid and bounce down. Then some guy would come and say, I think this fell out of your head. It's a long story. So I don't know about you guys, but every now and again, I still find a white bull, and it's kind of touchy now. They were kind of a pain in the ass at the time, but now it's like, memories.
I love that. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Emily,
they were
anything to
big.
add there?
Oh, go ahead. Emily.
I mean, the one with Chris, I was actually holding the iPad that was watching his face cam. And because I was standing with the team that does our face rigs, and sometimes we're always watching, we don't have a lot of downtime. We have to know what's going on. We have to know what people are doing, because you might be next to jump in and do that. And I was holding the iPad watching his face cam, and we're a family. We're in the water together 12 hours minimum a day for years. And I knew he was not okay. And like, just that rush comes over your body. I dropped the iPad and I was like, looking right in the tank. I'm like, he is choking. Like it was an eerie feeling. And, hats off to Kirk and Chris for getting that done, for sure. It's scary. My ball swallowing story isn't that exciting. It went right in, it came right out, and that was the end of that. But there was definitely other things that we got into that were scary. And like Mike said, I was saved by but it was Alex Krim. He was the camera guy that day, but he also has a background in stunts. And the things that we were doing, like Chris said, it was so controlled. I never felt unsafe. That never crossed my mind. And my hair got stuck in one of the creatures, and we had cut, and we were kind of lowering back down, and I was like kind of waving a little bit, and it was 2 seconds. He came and ripped me out. Like he knew right away that I was stuck, and he got me out right away, and it was no big deal.
Good.
But
Nice.
Yeah, I'd say the balls created other challenges. Like I felt really bad. Like anytime we would be driving them, the drivers were, if it was at the surface, your ears would be right at ball level and you couldn't hear. So I felt really bad when I finally got to swim away from the creatures and listen to how loud the underwater speaker was for everybody else. Like, Liz would be there especially too, and you're just like, we can't hear over the sea bob or balls, and everybody else is being blasted, and we just had to crank the volume up. The balls were a fun little challenge, and I would actually, because of the balls, the craziest thing, I felt bad for a lot of people. I was driving the creature that day. It was when the scene where the kids are jumping off the dock into the water. We had to drive the creature into a corner, and then everybody on the stunt team was individually, one by one, running off the end of a dock, diving in blindly, trying to land right on the creature as you see in the movie. And I think we spent a good half a day doing that. So here we go. We want you to land and dive on a hard piece of plastic, fiberglass, and a human in a sea bob without being able to see anything. So get the timing right, guys. And, we shot it all day and it came out great, but I was glad I was driving that day, because, I don't think I would have really wanted to dive off that dock. And those guys are in that position diving off the dock, so they can talk to how it was diving in, trying to grab a handle on the back of a person while moving completely blind as your face goes through millions of balls, then goes through the water, gets through the air bubbles, and then grab the handle and do it every single time right. So good job, guys.
Wow. That's a lot. I appreciate it. All right. So a couple more questions we got in here. And we didn't really address it. And they're questions that I think we can address now. The commentary was, it's two different questions, but it's all the same commentary of scuba diving versus free diving versus rebreathers. How much was done free diving versus scuba? Was there any rebreather action? Why weren't the rebreathers specifically used to eliminate bubbles? Does anybody fall in their expertise area to be able to answer this?
I mean, I guess with regards to the breath hold stuff versus rebreather stuff, I think initially when everything was being decided on how we were gonna, the performers were gonna, actors as well as stunts, as well as safety, we're gonna manage that. Everything that we could do on a breath hold, everything we could do was on a breath hold. We didn't need the rebreathers. The equipment of the rebreathers is such that there's a lot of maintenance. There's a lot of extra things that need to go into that. And there was nothing, I think, that eventually Jim and his team decided that we couldn't just do on a breath hold. And our training team with Kirk and Katie and Sylvie as one of our safety divers, and then us in turn, like all of us who were stunt performers also helped train and maintain the actors to their ability. There was nothing that we couldn't do on breath hold that needed to be for the cut pieces. So I think that sort of takes care of the rebreathing portion of that. But then going into scuba diving, as Chris mentioned, and I think as Mike touched on as well, when you exhale from just an open circuit scuba system, you create bubbles. And the idea was to eliminate that because the camera and the motion caption cameras, the tank was full of them. It was fully designed for us to be in there so that the cameras would attach to our markers that were all over our suit. I forget the number, but we had 70 dots on us, 50 dots on us. We had all these dots on our faces, on our helmets, on the things that we were carrying. And the cameras needed to pick up those reflective balls. Greg Allen was our motion capture guy, and he was in charge of sort of making sure that was all set in the morning so that we were in the system as, excuse me, whatever we were playing that day. Whereas the scuba system, as you exhaled, the camera would attract to the bubbles. And I think the only time scuba was really used was with some of the grips and the divers in the morning when they were cleaning the tank, just so that they could be down there vacuuming to make sure that all the dust particles and anything from the night before that collected on the surface from above and all that was all clean, so that we would have this amazing, the most ultimately clear crystal blue pool to perform in. It really was any kind of diver's magical playground. It was an amazing facility. And so if that answers the question, I think breath hold just became the fixed sort of activity that needed to happen. And also it allowed you to be more free. I know you were talking about some of the stunts that we did, but to perform with a scuba unit on and all that kind of stuff is super restrictive. And our cert guys, Emily, Leigh, and Benoit, who came in, they're amazing motion artists underwater. And to have structure on you, we did in some cases have to have some kind of structure on us, but it really broke up the motion. And Jim was very particular on how he wanted his creatures and his swimmers to look underwater. So I think when it came down to it, we didn't need to do anything more than hold our breath. The training team did a phenomenal job on training everybody, maintaining that throughout the entire production, both with us in Los Angeles and as well as New Zealand. And it just created this amazing environment for us to perform in.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you very much for that.
So I just to say, we did, especially when we would use scuba, and this is something I'm going to preface that is taught to never ever do, and it takes a lot of practice, right? Once you, as we always say in free diving as an instructor, once you're on scuba underwater, you are now a scuba diver. You're no longer a free diver. So sometimes getting into the creature rigs would take a little bit of time, and to get the timing right, we found out it was just better to go down on a long line. You'd get strapped into a creature and you would breathe up down there. So we could be at 10 feet, you could be at 30 feet. And that took some learning about how big of a breath do I take? What is my lung volume as I'm going to go to the surface? So you're not going to go to the 30-foot sump and take a full inhale because, yeah, you're going to have a pulmonary issue. So with a lot of practice, we did figure out, hey, how big of a breath shall I take on a regulator to do this scene on a breath hold as you're coming up and down? And I know for me personally, I think it was about twice I really started to feel that lung volume get big. So, you know, that's why I would say don't ever do it. And I would say that's something that a stunt diver would do is you're going to go down on a regulator and do your breath hold off of a regular at 30 feet. So you've got to be aware of what you're doing in the scene, what your people are doing around you. And then also if your lungs start to get a little bit big, you've got to be ready to even throw out a little couple bubbles. And Jim would always say like, hey, you guys are okay to exhale on that way up. I will accept those bubbles because I do not want anybody having a pulmonary issue. And so I know it happened to me about twice where I was like, oh, that was a little bit too big of a breath. Well, what I would try to do is every day go down, and when you're setting up, for me, how I would do it personally is go down and on a breath hold, how's my buoyancy? We're kind of used to our buoyancy. And you go down and just sip off that reg. So I can take a little bit more, or that was too much. So I'd always fine tune it every day just to see how the lungs were feeling and just the buoyancy, but that's what I would do. And so I'd say, don't try that at home, but that is one of the things that does make a stunt diver is, I guess, doing breath hold off scuba from 30 feet, which is it's a skill in and of itself. So
yes. And I think to clarify that, because we're going to have divers and non-divers looking at that, as you go down, your lung volume gets squished. If you take a big breath at that depth, you have re-expanded your lungs underwater, where freediving, they would compress. And as they would come back up, they would re-expand to the exact same size. If you take a breath at depth and you breathe off a regulator and fill those lungs up, they would be too large when they get to the surface. And just to kind of clarify that, and that's what you were talking about. What you were trying to do is take a breath on a regulator at depth to match the size that the lungs would be based off of the physics of being at that depth.
yes.
Yeah. So
It's all
that's
tricky,
how complex that is. Yes. I love it. Thank you. Wow, we got a bunch of questions in here. Classic one. Who held their breath the longest? I don't know if it's a competition between you guys or what that question is, or if that question is in general. We can do both. What actor or actress held their breath the longest? That's the first one. Who wants to answer that?
Who was it? Sorry, I'm forgetting if it was it Kate?
I think it was Kate with I want to say 7.
7, 14 or 15, something like that.
Yep.
7:14.
That's what I had.
Yeah.
And then I think their question is, of you 4, who's got the best breath hold?
I'm going to say Chris got to do one at the tank, and he did just over 15 minutes, I think. So I never went for the super long. I get too bored.
I'm gonna protect myself and say I wasn't there that day, so I didn't get a chance. There's no competition here. No competition
Not
here.
one bit. I love it.
Yeah,
right.
it was a 15-10. That was a 10-minute breathe up on 80% O2, ventilations for the first 3 minutes, purging for the final 7. And then the executive producer came over and told us to stop.
Let's see here. I'm gonna get rid of these ones. Couple of questions from somebody that seems to be somewhat in the biz a little bit for what you guys are doing. And we kind of hit on this before, and just for sake of time, just because we've got other webinars that are coming up to answer some of these, the team, the support team outside the water, what was that like? Just a general quick synopsis of what your support team was around you guys. That'd be beneficial to answer that.
Yeah, I can give you a quick one, Jason, is that movie making is definitely a team sport, but when you're working in water, that collaboration is infinitely more important. And, if I'm shooting a stunt on a dry stage, just on a movie that has no water in it, if you have an actor who has a costume and that costume needs to be adjusted, the costume designer walks over one of their people and they make the adjustment. But when you're in water, everything is kind of everybody's job. So the collaboration was huge. So, you know, Mike might be there assisting the costume department. They're watching on a monitor. They go, hey, can you swim down? And can you pull this out or fix her hair or something like that, you know? And there was so much collaboration with the sound department, you know, the grips that do all the rigging and everything. And it was really cool because it felt like a team that was all heavy hitters, and just that collaboration was really natural and worked super well. So, you know, just speaking versus a traditional movie set, things are a little bit more siloed. You know, you have these people this job and these people this job. These projects truly felt like everybody was pitching in just to get it done, which was quite cool.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah,
for that.
you know, you only have a certain amount of people. So yeah, as Chris was saying, like we would occasionally have to help out a grip to get something done a little bit faster. They'd come over. So it was really nice that everybody the department lines got a little bit blurred, shall we say, and everyone who just helped out, because you can't all of a sudden just get another always grip in the water to do something. It's just one of us would be there to help them, or they could help us bring something over. So it was great collaboration, I would say.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. There was a question about safety concerns. We've got a whole webinar on safety later on, so I'll kind of leave that to one of the later ones to answer that. How did the water affect other aspects of stunt work, such as rigging or ratcheting systems, et cetera? You kind of have glanced over that, so I think we can get a quick answer for this for Todd here. Todd Fredericks is asking that, how does the underwater affect rigging and ratcheting systems?
Our rigging. Oh, go ahead, guys.
No,
I was just
go.
I was gonna say our stunt rigger, our underwater stunt rigger was a chap, Kurt Lott, an amazing rigger that I think a lot of us have worked on many productions with him over the years. And not only they're amazing at what they do, but to give them their due, they also did everything mostly on breath hold when it came to rigging. I just want to throw that in there because, you know, sometimes we would have a change very quickly where, we had a jump or a pull through the water where the lines all had to be worked. So I think it was an education at a certain level for a lot of people, but, you know, we were with each other for 2 years. And, with the knowledge and the education that most of us from the stunt team had as instructors and stuff underwater, and would impart that on the guys who were rigging, it was an incredible team that we worked with. They were very open to ideas. I think that was another reason why this worked so well. You know, you get on some productions and everyone stays within their line, which is what's supposed to happen. But in this situation, because it was so different and we were doing something that has never really been done before, everyone was very keen to learn and educate themselves on the best way to do things. And Kurt and his team, they were in the water and they would jump in. I think even Kirk Krack, he did a course with the riggers and some of the grips on breath holds so that they had that education as well so that they could be safe. And Kirk would come down in the morning and warm up with us because he'd have to be in the water as well as the electricians, and camera guys. We'd all be warming up together. And in a normal world, like I may not have such a huge connection with that department. Not the stunt riggers, but maybe, camera, they're in their own world and they're doing their own setup, but we all work together. We all fed off each other. And it was safe. It was very clearly, everyone made sure everything like you would on a normal set that you felt comfortable doing it beforehand. But yeah, those guys all did breath hold as well, which was really cool. It became a family. That's what it was. From the last question I was asked, the whole thing became a family, and you just trusted each other, and everyone was very open-minded to the help and assistance that they needed to fulfill their job requirement.
Good. Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I have a couple of final questions that I'm going to ask you guys. I know we're over time, and I appreciate you guys taking the time and spending and answering all these questions. I'm fascinated by all your answers, and clearly no one's left the webinar, so they are too, like almost no one's left. So couple of questions. This one just came in, kind of supersedes the other ones. What were the Metakai water clan based off of? What and the distinctive swim, Metakai and distinctive swim, where did all that come from? Do we know? I mean, that's kind of outside like what a stunt diver is, but it's definitely information on the inside of things. So I think it'd be interesting to answer. Does anybody have an insight on where the distinctive swim came from?
I mean,
you
I think
might have to ask James Cameron about that one. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, that might be
Yeah.
above our pay grade.
Well,
Yeah.
call him and get him on the show, and
Yeah,
I'd be
just
more
ask
than happy to
Boston.
make that happen.
Yeah, yeah.
I
that was
think he
him.
just
That
wanted
was
something
what he
new.
wanted. That was his idea.
That's his idea. Okay.
Yeah, he
Perfect.
just wanted something new. I think that was just different than what can you do. We've all seen breaststroke, we've seen butterfly. We tried to come up with some things, and Jim ultimately had his mind. I don't know where he got it from, but he decided to make it his own. And so we kind of had to learn to do the alligator shuffle. I don't know what we called it, but it was definitely a unique style to give you propulsion. So we all practiced, and Jim picked it, and Jim made it.
Nice. I love it. Great answer.
Jason, just real quick, I'd throw in just so everybody remembers, like James Cameron is a man who has a very, very close connection with the ocean. You know, it's
Mhm.
rare to work on a movie and your director's been to the bottom of the Marianas Trench, right? And when
Yeah.
you look at some of the projects he's done with the Abyss and all that, he's a diver like us. He's experienced the ocean, and I think like his vision was just to share that with the audience. And so, you know, the cues that he gave us a lot of times were totally informed by like what is most like a lifetime of being an enthusiast, you know, looking into some of the ecology, you know, the protection and all that. Like Jim had a very clear design for what this movie would be because he's a diver himself. You know, it's not a guy who's never scuba dived making a water movie. It's literally like a mogul in just the water industry who's bringing this out. So, you know, a lot of those individual things where, you know, he's telling us something even as granular as like, this is the swim stroke. I think it just came from his love of the ocean and wanting to share that with people. And of course, I can't speak for him, but you could see the passion that would come out. Like we would do a scene and he was just like, man, I'm so excited for people to experience this in the theater. And obviously the hope is that like people then go, man, I wonder what scuba diving is like. And they go get certified or, you know, they go experience the ocean in some other regard too.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming anonymous attendee is you there, Chris, since the question is exactly based off of what you just like went through. The next question is that I was getting to your question, whatever you typed in the question box. So go ahead, Liz, answer that. Then I'll ask the anonymous attendee question.
No, I was just saying to Chris, a testament to Jim, you know, there would be certain days and certain things that he would come and he would ask our opinion. You know, I'm a dive instructor. I've spent a lot of time in the water with various different big animals, and he was very open-minded to get an input. And some days he'd be like, okay, and Garrett would say, okay, guys, this is what we're thinking, like, just do it. And they'd be like, no, that's not what we're looking for. They you know, so it was really humbling actually to have that ability to put an input, because he, you know, like Chris said, his knowledge of the ocean is so vast, and he spent more time in the water than probably all of us combined. To have that as a backing was really special. It was really cool. And I think, like Chris said, it's a testament to when you visually see the movement of the people, the movement of the creatures, the design of the animals that live on the world of Pandora, is we were recreating and trying to visualize what was inside James Cameron's imagination. And to the best of our ability, bringing this incredible idea to life was, it was humbling, and it was extraordinary at the same time.
I love it. That's a great answer. Thank you. How has being part of this production changed your thoughts about the ocean, ecology, human nature relationships, all those sorts of things? Did it change? I mean, Chris and Liz, you both kind of hit on this a little bit. It's a little bit different than what the question asked, but you guys kind of already hit on that. Emily, why don't you give an answer to this one? Did it change or reinforce or anything there?
I think reinforce is a really good word. You know, I'm not walking around thinking about it day to day, you know, but this is something that I think is really near and dear to Jim's heart. And like Liz touched on, you know, this is really important to him, and it's important to a lot of people. And, you know, I remember when they played back one of the scenes that we did with the Tolkien, and it was really emotional. I was like crying in the tank. I'm like, I'm never going to make it through this movie. You know, like
I remember that.
he really brings it. He really hits it home, and he pulls at your heartstrings. And to be trusted, you know, like she said, we're a family, and we spent so much time with each other, and he really trusts you to bring his vision to life. And it's an amazing responsibility and humbling. And I'm so happy that he trusts us to do that, because he comes in every day and he's always on, he's just always on. And, you have to follow his energy and his expectations. And he's amazing to work with. And like I said, he trusted us to bring that to life, and how important it was. And reinforce is a good word. It's on my mind. And I think his message, I think it hit a home run.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Jason, sorry,
Yeah.
excuse me. Can I just because a lot of the work that I do is in conservation with Patty and various nonprofits that I work with. And so the conservation message throughout this movie is amazing. Similarly to the first Avatar, which was talked a lot about sort of like deforestation and the effect that the human hand is having on the environment, that very much is a testament to what this second film is about, and the effect that we are having on our oceans, plastic, all that kind of thing. And it's really an extension of, Jim's message. He's a vegan, and him and his wife, they practice what they preach. The set was vegan. Everything that we used was recycled. So we lived in this world where not only were we performing in an environment to make a movie that was going to be a massive blockbuster, the biggest underwater movie of our time, probably ever. I mean, let's be realistic about that as well. But just as well, his focus, his respect for the ocean, I think really comes through on this. And working in conservation, it's something that people have asked me a lot about. And only after the film came out, obviously, you have the whaling and all that kind of stuff, and what we as humans are having on the environment. Jim lives that every day with the way he eats, with the way he lives. And I think that speaks volumes through this particular production, which makes it relevant for people as well. There's a lot of people that don't really know what's happening in our oceans, because they either don't live by the ocean, it's not really on their radar. But as someone who works in conservation, I believe that this really sort of helps people visualize that not only is this happening 150 years on a different planet away from us, but this is what's happening right now in our oceans today, and the effect that we are having on that. So not only is it an amazing water film, an incredible production, but it has a super strong conservational message as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. That is absolutely, I think where the person who was asking that question was going with it is, it's not even an undertone in the movie. It is what it's about, right? Is that conservation aspect of it. So I think that's really, really cool. Thank you. I've got one question from our notes that I have to have answered, because it's here and I don't know what it's all about, and I have to know. And then one other person, which is the question that I absolutely wanted to have answered at the end of this. So they asked it and I was going for that anyway. So magic hands, somebody wrote down magic hands. I know jazz hands. What is magic hands? Yes, these are your notes, Liz. Yes. What are magic hands?
So no, I was just putting my hand up because I think we were all magic hands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. We're all a part of this.
Okay.
I think Kirk Krack touched on this in his webinar discussion with you, and how he was in a lot of the shots that we had underwater, partly because he was the actor and the stunt safety, but also because in certain situations we needed to be in a place where we either assisted a situation, a performance that was happening, and basically I'm sure a lot of people out there know about sort of green screen and blue screening. And basically it was us either physically holding somebody or holding a reference point within the shot that the actor or the performer could focus on. And it was basically a way of us being in the shot, but not being seen and assisting the performer in the action that needed, either physically themselves or something around them that they needed to focus on or be a part of. But throughout the entire production, if we were not performing ourselves, if we were not training an actor on the side, if we were not helping in a warm-up or helping with safety, I think it's pretty likely that our hands and our heads or our feet were in a shot that was used to assist. And that's, I think that's magic hands. I don't know, maybe one of you guys have a different idea or a different way of saying it, but I think we were all magic hands at one point.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I mean, we did one shot where it's supposed to be in space, you know, and that's trying to recreate moving through space and water. And you need that magic hand, because if your buoyancy wasn't just perfect and you just started to sink towards the bottom a little bit, if you're trying to recreate space, you know, the natural thing as a swimmer is to scull up and swim up with your hand. But if you're in air, you can't do that. So I know Liz helped me out on that day where she'd just like take a finger and just be like, oh, you're sinking just a little bit. Oh, I'm going to push you up just a little bit. And so, yeah, I think we were all helped out somehow with magic hands. Just assist.
Yeah, I would argue that buoyancy sometimes was our biggest problem, just because we would have, it doesn't sound like a big problem, but sometimes we would have 4 people being captured and we all had to be exactly 2 feet under the water. And as you hold your breath for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and you're not allowed to correct yourself in your own buoyancy, that's where magic hands comes in. And it's kind of like that game as a kid where you're trying to keep the balloon in the air, you know, and like, oh, this person's coming down a little bit, this person's coming down a little bit. And we all had to stay exactly the same. So, and some of those were really difficult because we were so slow in our movements or so still. So sometimes buoyancy was our biggest problem.
Yeah. And with that, as soon as somebody moves and they're your reference point, if something else is your reference point, then you start moving and realize that you're off. Like, yeah,
exactly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Mike.
Oh no, so to say, yeah, that's a big challenge and so we could adjust with a breath hold for buoyancy, but you know, say Emily, it was going to be a 2-minute scene and Emily needed to be higher and Liz was lower. It's not necessarily always fair for the one person to get a bigger breath hold and struggle through a 2-minute breath hold on a half a lung volume. So that's where the magic hand be like, okay, you take your full breath hold, and the magic hander might be overweighted to where they're sinking so they can hold 2 people. There was definitely an intricate dance with keeping buoyancy to correct. And I think that was one of the hardest things, as Emily said, was getting everybody's buoyancy just dialed in. So magic hands really helped with that.
Yeah, there's a day on set that I'll never forget. Jim was there, and like everybody said, we're a family and we were problem solvers every day. Because I think somebody said it was the first time that we're doing any of this. It's the first time that any of this is ever being done. So we are constantly problem solving together. And I think that was really important as a team and as a family. And Jim was on set and everybody was throwing in their hands about how we could solve this problem. I think it was buoyancy. And he had an idea and everybody's like, yes, I'm so excited. And he's like, wait, everybody stop. Let's do this the easy way. And so we're all listening and he says it. And then we all kind of pause because it didn't sound easy at all, you know, and that's, but we were like, but that's something I learned really early on about Jim and how, you know, I've adopted this from him and kind of live my life this way now, because it's so admirable how he lives his life, because as long as there's an answer to the solution, it's not a problem. It doesn't matter how time consuming it is, how difficult it is, we have the answer. So that's what we're going to do. It doesn't matter how difficult it sounds. It's easy now because we have the solution.
Good. I like it. Thank you. One more question that we've got, and then we're going to wrap it up because we're significantly over time. And again, I really appreciate you guys' time. What are some certifications or skills to obtain to get into this line of work? Obviously, PFI had a big part in the freediving portion, but that's not a prerequisite to going ahead and becoming a stunt diver in any way, shape, or form, or into stunts in general, because it seems like you guys have that kind of varied background. So Chris, I know you and I talked about your background a little bit yesterday, so when we chatted on the phone. So why don't you go ahead and start us off, since I already know you got a good answer again.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's a common question. How do you get into the business? And in my experience, the majority of stunt performers were either former pro athletes in some regard or former military. seems like those two backgrounds kind of lends itself to like just a really solid work ethic, you know, very disciplined, all that, the physicality, the athleticism that goes into it. I mean, just look at this call alone, like, you know, Emily's world-class synchro swimmer. Liz is an Olympic level swimmer. You know, Mike was a high level triathlete and freediver. Like everybody's kind of got their thing.
And Steve Zissou lookalike. I mean, he's got the Steve Zissou thing going on. So
that's true. I hope he has a Glock on his hip right now.
Yes, thank you. I was hoping you guys would get the reference. I was debating on which way I was going to go with that. And yes, well done. Thank you.
100%. Yep. So, you know, with that, like the best advice I give people if they're trying to get into stunts, everybody's got their thing they're a 10 in, and you want to be an 8 or a 9 in as many other things as possible. And it's important to mention, like these films, the Avatar sequels were a bit of a unicorn in that most stunt performers don't have the opportunity to work on a water movie for like 4 years at a time. And, you know, the majority of stunts in general is reactions, fights, footfalls, getting hit by cars, falling downstairs, like, you know, that sort of thing. So this was a very rare opportunity to kind of like get our hooks into a water show. And there's a lot of films we've all worked on that have water portions, but they're definitely not to the level that this one was. So, you know, I think all of us would agree. I can't speak for everybody else, but I'm pretty sure we'd agree. Like we're all just super lucky to be there. Lucky that Garrett Warren brought us in, right? And it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity. And really, the credit goes to Garrett for building a phenomenal stunt team. He had the overall vision to do it. And you know, you look at the opportunity to work for James Cameron. Like if you said, okay, you get 4 years in film school, or you get 4 years working for James Cameron. Like I'd pick working for James Cameron just because the guy's a genius. He was literally put on earth to do what he's doing. So it was quite cool just to be a part of that. And I think, like, you know, they're certified and qualified. Those are two different things. And there's people out there with monstrous breath holds that have never been through a freedive course, you know. So that's only half of it, get the certifications. But if somebody was super dedicated, put their mind to it, wanted to get into the business, you know, for sure there's avenues to do that. I would say, like, have something that's a high level skill. But at the end of the day, like, this film from a stunt perspective was freaking lightning in a bottle. Like, we were so lucky to get this, and it'll likely never happen again just because of the unique circumstances around it. So I know we definitely all consider ourselves very, very lucky to have been a part of this.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Anyone want to add on to that and have anything they want to add?
I say, yeah, I feel super fortunate. I mean, the first movie I ever worked on was the Avatar sequel. So, you know, it's like, hey, I'm the starting quarterback. You're going to go start in the Super Bowl. So it was just an amazing opportunity that, you know, being that there's very few freediving instructors out there, there's not a lot, and especially through PFI, that I was fortunate to get my foot in the door. Garrett Warren saw something in me and it worked out. So I feel just really fortunate that he saw something in me. And then Chris has been in the business a lot longer than all of us. And I just followed him around like a lost little puppy and just tried to soak up as much of his information as I could. And, you know, you don't, I mean, one of the early things on that I learned, you know, when we were filming was, you know, if you're not in the industry, hey, it was really cool if we did this cool little creature movement or swim movement, but if the camera didn't see it, it didn't matter, you know. So that there's a lot of learning, and that's the one thing you can have, as Chris said, a monster breath hold. But if you've never worked in film, you don't know how to make the movie. And I mean, I just feel fortunate. I got to follow Chris around for 3 years of my life and just soak in all his knowledge, because he's a really talented and humble man. So I appreciate it.
Jason, can I just say something on that too? Just to
I would love it. Yes.
Yeah. So having spent a lot of my life in water, and every aspect of my life from when I was a kid through to what I do professionally now has involved water in some capacity. And I've been fortunate to dive in some pretty awesome caves and dive through some deep wrecks and free dive and do all that kind of stuff in some pretty unique and wonderful places. Being a part of this production taught me so much about water that I didn't know. And I kind of went in being like, you know, I'm water, I know water, but being around people like Mike just said, you know, Emily, Leia, and Benoit brought in an avenue of performance underwater that I knew that it existed, but not to the capacity that I saw and that I experienced. And so we worked together as a team, but we were all brought on very specifically for very specific reasons. And to what Chris said, yes, I feel very, very fortunate and lucky and privileged to have been a part of it. But the education that I received has helped me, expand my abilities underwater. I remember we were working one day and we were trying to figure out a scene, and I think I was the creature, or I was Emily's creature and she was one of the face characters. And, they're like, spend a couple minutes just sort of figuring out like how you guys want to move in the water. And I just kind of looked over at Emily and it's like, what should we do? And she just said, well, why don't we just like catch our breath and we'll just figure it out when we're underwater. We got it, Liz, we got it. We'll know what we'll do when we're down there. And sure enough, like we go down on breath hold, she grabs onto my shoulder, she straps into the creature. And we just did like this really cool movement, just making it up as we went along. And I knew that she had it and she knew that I had it, and our breath holds match. So it kind of just worked. So yes, a testament to the people that I worked with as well. I've learned so much about it. And yes, I know about water, but they really helped me, get that further education. And I still have a lot to learn. That's what I learned. I still have a lot to learn.
I love it. That's great. Emily.
You can't say it any better than the three of them did. I'm so incredibly privileged and thankful to be a part of this. And there are tons of things I would have done differently. I was getting schooled on how to be on a set every day, and like Mike said, Chris was the most experienced as far as working on films, and we came in kind of uneducated in that regard, but educated in many other areas, and we just all worked together so well, like Liz said, and we really found we really found each other, on set, because we could see what each other was good at. And it's a testament to Jim and Garrett as well, who saw that talent in us and trusted us with specific things. And anybody looking to get into this specifically, I would say, it's less about certifications and more about your comfortability in the water, because it's going to show right away. I've been swimming my entire life. I've done water things my whole life, and Avatar was the one time where I was a little bit uncomfortable a couple times with the things that we did. So just be comfortable in the water. And, we really are a family, like Liz said, and we'll still text each other every now and again, like, oh, I found a ball in my Christmas box, or like whatever. I miss you guys so much. Like we became a family. We were a really well-oiled machine, and the education I received on that film, like it changed my life forever. There's not a day goes by that I don't think about it and think about this group, and I'm super thankful.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys. That is all the questions. We went over by 45 minutes. We went 45 minutes. We went over by 45 minutes. So I really, really, really appreciate you guys taking the time today. I know it's a Sunday and it's the middle of the day, and morning for some of you guys, but I really appreciate your time. And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with all of you guys, and enlightening. And I've been excited all weekend, and it was for a good purpose and good reason. So I really appreciate your guys' time. So thank you very much. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Plus.
What did I say?
All
I
right.
see you.
I see you.
I see you.
I love it.
That's a command.
I see you. Yeah. All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I really appreciate it. To everybody who's on the webinar, thank you for joining us. There are 3 more webinars the rest of April. Next week is off, and then the following 3 weeks. So we will be talking about more and more things Avatar. So thanks, guys, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Cheers.
Thank you, Jason.
Cheers.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Have a good
Cheers.
one.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.